G'day YouTube, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about modifying the suspension on the FMS FCX18 LC80. More specifically, we're going to be talking about lowering the suspension a little bit to improve stability and off-road performance. So if you're interested in finding out more about this project, stick around, it's coming right up. So I've had this truck for a while and haven't really done anything with it. It's sitting here completely bone stock. I drove it a bit when I first got it and then just kind of lost interest in it and put it up on the shelf. And I think the reason I lost interest in it is because the driving experience straight out of the box wasn't super compelling for me, at least not the way that I like to drive the trucks. So today we're going to be taking a look at modifying the suspension on this thing, getting it lowered down, trying to get a bit more stability out of it. I've created these custom carbon fiber shock towers, one for each corner, to lower this thing down. I didn't want to just pull the springs out and run a full droop setup. I still wanted to have some compliance so that when you're running a little bit faster in second gear, it can still absorb some bumps. So that's what we're going to focus on in today's video. We're going to be taking a look at some before and after running footage and see what sort of performance we can get out of this thing. So hopefully with this low down camera angle you can really get a sense of how high this vehicle is sitting. Between the stock suspension setup and those portal axles, the vehicle does have a decent amount of flex. It has plenty of clearance. It just ends up being really tall and really ungainly, and with the stock tires not really hooking up that well, anytime the terrain gets steep, this vehicle really struggles, and you can see here that gravity eventually wins. And I think you could probably argue that this vehicle isn't strictly intended to be a rock crawler with a more trail driving focus with that 2-speed transmission. However, even in a trail driving scenario with faster speeds, the vehicle's still going to benefit from a lowered suspension, boosting its stability. You can see here that the stock tires have a nice soft rubber compound, but something about the tread design, that combination with the insert they come with, they just struggle to really hook up. And if the vehicle was a little lower down, you'd be able to back it up and just give it a little jump, a little bit of a bounce up this climb, but we're sitting up so tall that the vehicle just becomes unstable and it's pretty much impossible to make it up that line there. So we take a little side track so we can get to the top of the hill here, and this vehicle is fun. I do enjoy the 2-speed transmission. The new 180 size motor is actually really good. The electronics feel nice, the slow crawl's good. It is a fun vehicle, but at least in my opinion, the tall suspension really lets it down and limits its capabilities. Before we tear into this thing, I want to show you exactly what we're trying to improve upon. So if you take a look with the stock suspension setup, the battery is installed, so this has the weight bias set up as it would be ready to run. And when you compress the front suspension there, you can see that the wheels don't really tuck up into the fenders. Even when you flex one wheel up into that front fender there's still plenty of space above that tire. And that might be really good if you want to run large tires, but that's just going to compound that tall center of gravity again. So we're going to go the other way. We're going to stick to a similar size tire, and we're going to try to get those tires to tuck right up into those fenders and get this center of gravity down a bit lower. You can see with the body off there, we've got these nice big bore oil filled shocks that are actually quite a nice shock. These ones haven't leaked any oil out, which is a good thing. You can see these stubby little shock towers here that we're going to try to rework. We're not only going to bring the upper shock mount higher up, but we're going to also lay the shock over on an angle and try and get a bit more flex out of this thing. So I'm going to install those shock towers and then we'll take a look at how that turns out. I've installed the shock towers on the left hand side so you can see how much we're lowering the vehicle here. You can see that axle's sitting on an angle with the stock setup on the right and the lowered towers on the left, and it's bringing that axle up quite a bit. I did have to put a small brass spacer on the top shock mount here just to keep the body of the shock from interfering with these mounting screws. If you had countersunk mounting screws. You wouldn't need that spacer. Obviously, you might not be in a position to make your own shock towers out of carbon fiber. Any rigid plastic would do the trick. Maybe even some styrene sheet from the hobby store. Matt from 2FM RC created a similar shock tower out of servo horns. So this is just to give you an idea of what I'm doing with the truck and what sort of impact that's going to have on the performance, and give you guys some ideas of your own if you want to improve the suspension setup on your own FCX18. Up front, the only thing else I did other than the shock towers is I actually removed the preload collar off the shock itself. When the springs are installed, it actually preloads the springs very slightly, and up front I wanted as little preload on that spring as possible, so I've removed the screw-on preload collar, and you can see there's zero preload on that spring. It just fits in there perfectly. So I'll get the other side completed, put the body back on, and we'll take a look at the results. So hopefully you could see from those shots on the bench there that this thing is sitting a lot lower than it comes stock out of the box. It's a lot more realistic scale looking ride height in my opinion, and before sitting this thing next to the 4M Bronco, it was just completely towering above it like a monster truck. You could see from those shots that the roof line is a lot more comparable with the 4M Bronco. I think that's going to give this thing a lot more stability out on the rocks, and our shock towers, I think, even gave us just a touch more articulation. So about one tyre's height worth of articulation, which is about perfect for a scale truck like this. So I'm going to steal the wheels and tires off the Bronco. So we've got the Baja Pro X from Proline mounted on here, and we'll have the LGRP Cyclones with the brass rings in it just to get a little bit of weight down low. We're going to get this thing back out onto the rocks and see how it performs. I'm really liking the way the truck looks with its new lowered stance. These wider wheels and tires really fill out the fenders, and the truck is looking fantastic. You can see here this climb that we weren't able to make our way up before. It wasn't any issue at all. Those portal axles really provide a lot of clearance, and the truck is a lot of fun to drive. Motor and transmission combo is excellent for slow crawling, and so it's nice to be able to finally utilize some of this vehicle's capability now that it has a low center of gravity. Those Mickey Thompson Baja Pro X I've had on the 4M Bronco for quite some time. They're well worn in, they're feathered up nicely on the edges, and they provide nice predictable traction. They're not the stickiest tires out there, but I think they're a great all-rounder for a scale truck like this. Here I struggled a bit with the steering. The stock servo savers are pretty soft, and it really made it difficult for me to position the vehicle accurately for this descent. You can see I kind of just tumbled my way down there. The vehicle was stable enough to be able to keep it together, but that's something that I'll likely look at improving in the future, is the steering situation on this truck, either removing that servo horn or just swapping to a different servo completely. But I think you can see here with our lowered suspension, this vehicle is really performing nicely. It's a ton of fun. It has a lot of clearance with those portal axles, and it's really quite a capable truck with just some minor modification. It's a great looking scale body. The front and rear bumpers are well designed. They tend to slide over the rocks really well. Obviously an ARB inspired front and rear bumper combination. You can see this little section here, the rear bumper does actually hook up on this rock, but a little bit of a reposition and it's not a problem at all. So I'm really enjoying the vehicle now that it has a more capable suspension setup. The shocks are really nice, and I may even have a play around with shock oils to see if I can improve stability even further, but I think this is a great start to getting this thing drivable and fun out on the trails. Hopefully you could see from that running footage there that this vehicle is performing really well. Just lowering it down a small amount has given it a huge boost in performance. Obviously the brass rings in these wheels helps the center of gravity a little bit as well. Some better wheels and tires definitely help it to hook up. But with a little bit of work, this vehicle can be very capable out on the rocks, and I'm really enjoying how it's driving at the moment. I might even add a little bit more brass in those axles, maybe some brass portal covers or something similar, but this is definitely a step in the right direction, and it's a lot of fun to drive. That's where we're going to wrap things up for today. If you got any value out of today's video, please consider subscribing to the channel. If you've got any questions or comments, make sure you leave them down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.